Hello, this is Father Hightower, and welcome to Vox SFX, the voice of St. Francis Xavier Parish in Missoula, Montana, and sponsored in part by the Foundation for the Diocese of Helena. We are so pleased that you have joined us. Your participation enriches our community. We hope that our show serves as a point of light, helping to deepen our understanding and experience of the Catholic faith and history. Join us as we seek, through prayer, study, interviews, and discussion, the roots of our ancient mysteries.
Hello, and welcome to Vox SFX, the voice of St. Francis Xavier Parish in Missoula, Montana. Today's episode is about the Novenas of Grace, and I'll let Luke explain it a little bit better, but the novenas are something that is really cool. Basically a 9-day meditation, a 9-day prayer cycle, where you focus on the same themes every single day, and as you do so, the message can become more and more intense. I've been involved in these before in the past myself, and I really found them quite fruitful. So if you have a chance to do anything like that, I highly recommend it, because these extended prayer periods are something that really help you get in touch with yourself, with God, and it's really quite meaningful in a lot of ways. So if you have a chance to do any, I highly recommend it. But this was a really fun episode to record. Luke is so knowledgeable in the subject, and he's so willing to share that knowledge. We really are blessed to have him here, because not only does he work, of course, on that, but he works on the SEAL program as well, which is something that is very near and dear to me personally. It's the spiritual exercises for everyday living, and so he is a big part of what makes that function. He's a big part of what makes that kind of go forward, and that'll be something that we cover in a future episode, hopefully not too far away, these spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius. But real quick before we get started, let's touch base on some events. They're going to be happening around the Missoula area. So it is Lent, as you guys are fully aware based on the last episode that we had. And there's going to be a breakfast here at St. Francis Xavier on Thursdays between February 22nd and March 21st. And those are going to be from 6:30 in the morning till 7:30 in the morning. And just some coffee, some good little breakfast things. And if you're a regular attendee of the morning masses and the rosary here during the weekdays, this would be a nice one, nice little way to wake up and say hello to people before we get into it. And the same idea of sharing meals with one another in fellowship. There's the classic fish fries that the Knights of Columbus do, and I believe that's at St. Anthony's. And that is going to be every Friday during Lent between 5:30 and 7:30. Adults are $15 and children are $9. And that's really not that bad when you consider the amount of fish and everything that are there. So that's another fantastic little tradition. So please to stop by for that one. It's one of my favorites. And then the novenas that we're going to be talking about today are going to be between February 22nd and March 5th. And that might not be the case in your particular area. The Novenas of Grace are kind of particular to St. Francis Xavier, which is to say not necessarily our parish, but the saint whose namesake that we take for our parish. And so if you're near a Jesuit parish that might participate in this, it's worth looking into it, because these novenas are really quite something. But I think I've yammered for long enough, so let's get into it and talk about the Novenas of Grace. With us in the studio now is Luke Larson, who is the Director of Spirituality here at St. Francis. Luke, thank you so much for coming on today.
It's my great pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
The subject we're discussing today, the novena, not a whole lot of people have heard about this, especially people who are outside of the faith. This is something that is almost kind of singular to us. What is a novena, just to start off?
Good place to start. So, and there's a lot of misnomers about novenas too, so we might get into a little bit of that. But just let's take the words. Novena is short for Novena of Grace of St. Francis Xavier. So novena means 9 each. So there's 9 days that are set aside for this special time of prayer of prayer, of attending liturgies if you can, and just being mindful of God, through the patronage of St. Francis Xavier. So, Novena of Grace connotes God's free gift to us, giftedness to us, blessings. And then St. Francis Xavier is our patron saint, our special saint, our go-to saint at our parish here in Missoula, our Jesuit parish. And, we can talk more about him, but that's the whole title.
Sure.
Novena of Grace of St. Francis Xavier.
It just has a cool ring to it, too. It just sounds so regal, almost, in a way.
When you start off with a little Latin,
Sure. So are the novenas specific? Because St. Francis Xavier was one of the founders of the Jesuits.
Correct.
Who are kind of in charge of the parish that we're a part of. Is the novena singular to folks who follow a Jesuit tradition, or is it widely used by the rest of the church, too?
The Novena of St. Francis would be more specific to Jesuit parishes and the Catholic Church more in general. That doesn't preclude anybody, though, from participating and even going online and looking up, Googling the Novena of Grace of St. Francis Xavier and praying the prayer of the novena every day by yourself. So there's all kinds of ways to do it, and nobody's excluded.
Sure.
In fact, we welcome all to participate.
What's the history of the novena? Is this something that we've had since the beginning, or was the whole tradition started by St. Francis Xavier?
There's a couple myths, a couple stories that go along with the beginning of the novena that I kind of want to ignore in a way, because they lend themselves to that magical thinking that if you pray through this 9-day of special set-aside prayer, if you do this and that during this time, then God's going to come through for you. It's kind of, I'm obligating God to... Transactional, contractual, that kind of thing. I want us to avoid that kind of magical thinking. But that said, they claim, there's a couple stories. A crippled boy, crippled from birth, was instantly cured by praying to St. Francis Xavier or praying for his intercession. And another one has a Jesuit priest in the 16th century. He got hit on the head accidentally by a hammer and was near death, and he wanted to be a missionary or continue his missionary work. And so he prayed to St. Francis Xavier, if you cure me, if I get cured, then I will continue my missionary work. And supposedly, if you pray for 9 days and if you go to confession and if you receive Holy Eucharist during that time, then you're going to get cured. And the story goes that he was. But again, you know what I'm saying, that we don't want to foster or promote that kind of, magical thinking. Sure. About, if I come and just say the right number of prayers, then my wishes are going to come true,
Well, it almost sounds as like it may have come from the same era that like the indulgences came from, that era of the church where it was entirely too monetized and where we said, hey, if you come in and pay $1, your grandma can get out of purgatory a day free. And so was that kind of the same idea coming into it, or is it a different idea?
Right. And St. Francis of Xavier, Spain, and St. Ignatius of Loyola, really the co-founders of the Society of Jesus, what we know as the Jesuits. A good part of what they did was in that counter-Reformation time and trying to dispel the myths of the church that, we do indulge, or, we should continue to do them at that time, that type of thing. And that notion of, if you do a pilgrimage or, whatever, that you earn God's favor, And there's another misnomer in there that we might just mention real quick, that we don't pray to the saints. We're not praying for 9 days to St. Francis Xavier. We are praying with him and asking him to intercede for us, no less than what we would do if we were, I got a medical procedure tomorrow. Hey, Nicholas, would you pray for me?
Sure.
And so we say, hey, Francis Xavier, hey, won't you pray for me?
And we're going to eventually go into a larger episode about saintly intercession and about how the Catholic Church views that as well. But that's a good way to phrase it right now, because many of our listeners may not be Catholic and may not understand the way that we approach our particular saints. But I think that's kind of cool. I think that this tradition evolving out of that idea of, okay, we need to do better. How do we do that? How do we better serve the church? How do we better serve our communities and ourselves? This is a really cool way of doing it, because it's so quiet. And it's so introspective when you're doing it.
Yeah, and that's what it's about, drawing closer to God, setting aside 9 days of being a little bit more mindful and present with God and such. And I love our novena here comes right with Lent, so it kind of helps set aside Lent a little bit more.
Is that normal? Do a lot of places do a Novena of Grace just before Lent, or is that a tradition that's specific for us here at our church?
Yeah, the Novena of Grace of St. Francis Xavier would traditionally, go between March 4th and March 12th. And March 12th then is the anniversary of the canonizations of St. Francis Xavier and Ignatius of Loyola. They were canonized at the same time. So hence on the 12th, we end the novena. And that would be the traditional time frame.
But this year we've moved it up.
But this year, because of scheduling considerations, we have moved it up. And that's important for our listeners to, make note of, to mark their calendars, because it starts now on February 26th, it's a Monday, and then we'll end on March 5th. So don't come that way.
Shucks, I missed it.
Yeah.
So we've discussed that a novena is a 9-day process, and it involves a lot of prayer and a lot of introspection. But what else goes into this? What exactly makes a novena a novena?
Yeah, and again, it can be as simple as during your prayer time at home, printing out the traditional novena prayer, the prayer of asking for St. Francis Xavier's intercession. And then it can then include coming to the parish church and participating in liturgy either at noon or at 6 in the evening. Those are on the weekdays,
Sure.
the weekdays. And then on the weekends, it's just Saturday and Sunday. And then we live stream them too. So, you can watch live or watch the recording anytime at your leisure. So the elements include just a regular Mass with the inclusion of the presenters will read off our prayers of petition and thanksgiving that we write on little slips of paper, and then they read those off, and that's really special, because we're all bringing our prayers, our private prayers, but we're all bringing them to that prayer of that time of novena. And then another special thing, Nicholas, that happens with the novenas right after the masses, we call it praying with the relics. So we have half a dozen relics, little, maybe a chip of bone or a little tiny body part of one of the founding members of the society, St. Ignatius, St. Francis Xavier, or Peter Claver, one of these early Jesuits. We have a relic in a little container, and we place it in the petitioner's hand, the person that's come up to pray with us. And there's half a dozen of us that are prayer ministers at that time. And then people, Nicholas, what would you like to pray for today? Or what are you praying for? And then you share that with me, in a whisper. And then I might chat with you a little bit and then say, through the powerful intercession of St. Francis Xavier, may your prayer be taken to the very heart of Jesus, or something like that.
Sure.
And that is very meaningful to both the people that are doing that, But it's incredibly meaningful to us who are the prayer ministers. We have no idea, just sitting in a congregation, how, what's going on in people's lives, and how, the pain or the difficult situations that people are, so it's an honor to pray with people in those situations. So that's another element of the novena.
Well, it makes it so much more personal too. It's not just a kind of an abstract. There's an interaction between us as a community and us with y'all being the prayer ministers and kind of helping people process and bring these ideas, bring these prayers before God. It's a really kind of special arrangement that happens there.
I couldn't agree more. And there's something about taking what is inside of us that's deeply meaningful, very on our heart and soul kind of thing, and then speaking it, just kind of putting it out there in a one-to-one private kind of way. But you're right, it's not just like going to church and we're all facing to the front with our pews and not interacting with each other and just kind of, I'm there for my own piety, kind of. No, this is a chance to like you just said, personalize it, have it be more personal and personal.
And now the public element of it, which is the presentations. I really, like last year, for instance, I loved the presenters that we had in. I was involved in the service to begin with, but being there and like having the honor of hearing them speak was just a delight. But they were out of state. They were folks who kind of do this for a living. They kind of travel around and present for a living. Whereas this year, we've got some local folks who are going to be our presenters. How do we make that decision? How do we decide the best people to do the presentations at this novena?
Yeah, most often we try to get a Jesuit, somebody in the Jesuit order, and a co-presenter that is typically a woman, kind of a collaborator with. This isn't a very sophisticated answer, but we kind of look around, and who's done it before, who can do, who's willing to, because it's quite a commitment, as you can imagine, especially when people are traveling to be here and then spending 9 days with us, participating in 2 liturgies, giving 2 talks a day,
And all the preparation that goes into doing something like that too,
Oh my goodness, yes, yeah, preparing their notes and their reflections and such. It's a blessing. I mean, we're just absolutely delighted that Father Victor Cancino, who is a Jesuit, is one of the presenters, and then Myra Martinez is our other. So Father Victor is, they call him pastor in residence at St. Ignatius Mission, north of us here. And he's also a member of the local Jesuit community, of course. And then Myra works with him as his pastoral assistant, and she's connected with the Ignatius Mission, but she works mostly in Arlie with the Catholic community there, the Sacred Heart. The thing that I just think is so marvelous about Father Victor in particular is, he's a brilliant man. He's a scholar. He's a linguist. And yet his homilies, his reflections are just down to earth, very relatable, very, they're incredibly, theologically sound and all that, but still very, again, down to earth. And I love that, he's just
accessible.
Easy to talk. I mean, easy to listen, and you always go away, with, your own points of reflection.
And a sense of calm. I very much enjoy talking with Father Victor too. He just kind of exudes this sense of calm, and I dig that as well. And I haven't had a chance to meet her yet, so I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be great.
And I am too, in terms of literally have met her, but just to get acquainted in that during that period, yeah. And then, of course, to hear her talk.
Well, and this is a lot of effort that goes into this. It's not just, we got the acquiring of the space and making sure that it's squared away, the presenters, the music, making sure that everybody knows about it. Luke, this is a lot of work. What called you to this?
Well, it is, and a lot of work done by a lot of really good dedicated people. And you just mentioned the music. It's pretty significant that we have live music, that people come to be the cantor and the accompanist, the pianist for 9 days. That's a lot that to ask of people. And it's so cool that they all do that. The start was just our pastor at the time when I came here with my wife 8 years ago just asked me if I would lead the effort, lead this work as part of my role as the director of spirituality. That fits into if you're called a director of spirituality, you get to have a lot of things fold into that.
That's a big purview, right?
Right. And it can expand as much as needed, Nicholas, the cool thing about it is that it does fit into Lent. I mean, it's some icing on the cake kind of thing for Lent. In Lent, well, it doesn't always happen, but the intent, the desire is always to be a little bit more focused, a little bit more prayerful and reflective and all of those kind of things. Well, this helps. This kind of does it.
Well, it's conducive for sure. As we were talking about last episode, that Lent is a time for reflection. It's a time for taking stock. Kind of seeing where we are to disconnect with ourselves, with God, and trying to find a way to bridge that gap in the form of Good Friday and moving into the redemption factor. And the novenas, just the way that they're set up, the focus of them, they sound perfect for starting that off.
Exactly. And of course, your presenters are picking their themes that are in alignment with this time of year and what's going to help us best prepare for the Easter season and the Paschal mystery and the Easter season. And this year, of course, will be no different. Father Victor and Myra have chosen What Are You Looking For as the Novena theme, and it's taken from the Gospel of John, when that moment when Jesus is kind of walking away from the setting, and John the Baptist says to a couple of his disciples at the time, John and Andrew, hey, you don't need to follow me anymore. That's the guy to follow. And so they kind of tootle off behind Jesus, and Jesus turns around and says, what are you looking for? Other translations say, what do you want? Or what do you seek? What are you seeking? But I love, what are you looking for? It's kind of that, what do you desire? What do you really want here? So that's the theme. What are you looking for? And of course, we're asked to take that question to heart. What am I looking for in life, in my relationship with God, in Lent, in this novena? What am I looking for?
Well,
and so we get to ask that.
Well, understanding our own intent is huge. We can understand where we're coming from, our motivations for doing something, and therefore try to make those more pure in a way, mm-hmm. Try to make them in more alignment with who we want to be and who we're called to be. I think that's a very important question.
I just love what you just said, kind of to purify or to really ask ourselves, what's our deepest desire? We've got lots of wants and desires and yearnings, whatever, but what do we most deeply desire? And at some point, we kind of peel the onion to say, it's God,
Right.
The giver of grace is the gift. God is the gift,
That's perfect.
Right?
I like that a lot.
If you have God, meaning that kind of intimate relationship with God, what else? What else do you really, yearn for in the same way?
And that's kind of the end goal of the novenas at this point. Right?
Exactly.
As we're moving towards it, that kind of like that reconciliation feeling is the object of the practice, I would think, yeah?
Right. Absolutely. People come to the novena typically with an intention. I just really want to dedicate this novena to praying for my son who's struggling with drugs or something, or struggling in school, or I just really want to pray for my aunt's healing. They typically come with an intention. Again, I think that helps focus us. That helps, and all, hopefully we trust, that not in a magical way that the novena's gonna, God's gonna come through for us because we just did this 9 days, but that we're just drawing closer. We're just we do it out of love. We come to the novena out of love, not out of obligation or some kind of manipulation or something. Some kind of.
It's a liberation from all of that.
I love that. Yeah.
And I really like the idea of it too. Now, real quick, the question just occurred to me: is 9 significant? Because that kind of it's not quite the length of a week. It's longer than the length of a week. So, what's the significance of 9? Or is it just a number that Saint Francis Xavier said, "Hey, this is a great number to go with. We're just going to go ahead with this one."
I think that's it. I have not heard of any other rationale for 9 here. It's interesting. I mean, because 7 is often thought of as a number meaning encompassing all.
12 is really common too, because the numbers of
exactly, and we hear 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 apostles, and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So why 9? Let's just say that novena, 9 each, sounds pretty good.
And if that was the only reason they selected it, it's a good one. Because novenas sounds cool to me.
I'm trying to think of I can't even, I wouldn't know it in Latin, but like, ocho or something. I mean, I don't know if it would.
The Ochean? That doesn't quite work.
Ochia or something. I don't know how you.
No, novena does sound pretty good.
Yeah. It rolls off the tongue just a little nicer.
Well, it also fits with the character of St. Francis. We haven't talked about him a whole lot on this show, and we're going to do an episode at some point on him as a person. But just the transition of his life into that more reflective quality, like this seems just so on brand for him as the saint that we know.
Yeah, and just a really nice way to kind of set up St. Francis in terms of who he was and such, because he was very resistant to the tauntings, the gentle tauntings of St. Ignatius of Loyola at the time, who was I don't think, well, maybe they were actually dorm mates, but they were certainly classmates at the University of Paris. And Ignatius was trying to get this very brilliant Francis Xavier to join him in ostensibly to start the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. But at first, Xavier wanted nothing to do with it, and Ignatius kept quoting, what does it benefit a person to gain the whole world but then lose your soul? And that finally, struck home with Xavier, and they did eventually become companions. But they're both Basque Spaniards. They're both from that Basque region of Spain. Actually, their home castles, they're both noblemen, were not that far from each other. And my wife and I had the privilege of being able to go to the Xavier. I mean, they call it Javier, the little town, and then there's his castle is the big thing right there. I mean, it's the centerpiece, and it's a medieval castle.
Sure.
It really looks like. Have you been?
I have not.
Yeah. So and then of course you get to tour it and. See, this is his bedroom, and this and that and the other thing, and but so to leave that kind of noble heritage and aristocracy and then to give all that up and then become Francis Xavier was famous as a missionary, he volunteered to go to Portuguese colony in India at the invitation of the King of Portugal. But anyway, so he went to Goa in India and then on to Malaysia and Japan. But Francis Xavier is the patron saint of missionaries, but just a lot of great stories, some of which, we're real careful with in the novena, that we don't, the exaggerated stories of miracles and
transactional cures.
These kinds of things. Yeah, exactly. And that's a good way of saying it.
And it's reflected in the modern Jesuit order, too. I get not to go too much into depth on this particular detail yet, but the Jesuits themselves are very educated, well-traveled folks. I mean, they go to postings all over the place. Father Hightower was in Iraq before he came to us. Father Cochrane was up in Alaska. Mm-hmm. And by Alaska, we don't mean Juneau. We mean seaplane, dog sled, sort of Alaska.
Yeah.
And these guys they've got multiple degrees, and they're very, so like, this novena doesn't just come from a place of simply reflection. It also comes from a place of these deeply knowledgeable and these deeply spiritual guys who had kind of come to this based on their travelings and based on their exposures to the world. And I actually really like the fact that we have a tradition that is kind of a culmination of a lot of different things coming together.
Yeah, I agree with that. And of course, Ignatius and Xavier were very educated.
Right.
Francis Xavier had a master's, from the University of Paris, and so.
Guys.
Yeah.
Well, before we end, I just wanted to ask, what is your personal experience with the novena? Is there something that keeps you coming back beyond just being director of spirituality? Is there something personal about it for you?
The opportunity to sit and participate in a community that is all walks of life, ages and all kinds, but that are all, you just know we're all praying for something in particular, but collectively though too, and so that just that sense of community and I Nicholas, I just love that what could be seen as really an old-fashioned pietistic kind of antiquated practice really has been to be very meaningful for us today. And again, without that overlay of I'm going to do this, so God's got to do that kind of thing. Yeah.
There's no gotcha clause with God.
Well, right.
Well, before we end for today, sir, was there anything else that you'd like to say about the subject in the novenas?
Well, I just really appreciate the this opportunity to talk about the Novena of Grace and just to welcome everybody. It's free, and the doors are wide open,
Right here at St. Francis Xavier, which is 420...
West Pine Street.
I always want to say Spruce, because that's on the other side of us.
We're neighbors with Providence Hospital,
mm-hmm.
Providence St. Patrick, and we welcome you. And come and see our beautiful murals that depict scenes from the life of St. Francis Xavier.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Luke.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for being with us today as we walk as pilgrims this road together. If you feel called to learn more, please consider checking out St. Francis Xavier or your local Catholic church. All are welcome into our community as God loves us all equally. If you are interested in supporting the Vox SFX podcast, please visit sfxmissoula.org/donate. Until next time, go forth in peace and be the light of Christ in someone's day.